o'clock. We'll call to order our first meeting of 2019. Second item on our agenda is the hearing of residents. We have 3 people signed up to speak. We have Juan Jesus Gomez for the Main Street. Would you like to come up and speak? If you would please state your name and address for the record, so if you would please state your name and address for the record so the secretary can capture that. Okay.
There's no room for business cars to park outside or anything. So I think it would be best for Schertz to be turned 802 into residential. I'm pretty sure you've seen the house, and there's just no room for other cars where they're going to park if it's a business. That's all I have to say.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Next person signed up to speak is Kevin Calcote. Calcote? Calcote. Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Calcote, and I'm a part owner of 802 Main Street. And we are requesting the dual use of that property because the restrictions, I guess, pertaining to being a commercial property, there's just no way that property can be considered strictly commercial. Because of the access to parking, access to walls that were supposed to be put up and everything else. There's just no way it would happen that way. So we're hoping you guys approve the dual use for the purpose of the property.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, last person signed up to speak is John Sullivan.
Good evening, 513 Triple Crown. I just wanted to bring up, I don't know how many people are aware, probably not many in the city in general actually, is that the dry Comal watershed is impaired for E. coli and has been since 2010. Recently, the City of New Braunfels does the watershed protection plan for it, and they recently released it in August. But I just want us as a city to think about, what we're doing on that watershed. I enjoyed swimming in the Comal, but being impaired for E. coli is kind of not exciting. And that's if you're not aware, that watershed, basically most of the northern Schertz sector is in that watershed from 3009 north, and there's even parts of Cibolo in it. So I just wanted us to be aware and think about it, especially, I know on the agenda tonight there's a sewer waiver, and it's probably not a big deal for that tonight, but especially with developments, they're doing a lot with funding for like pet waste stations. They're not completely sure how much of the E. coli is from each source. They have some guesses. There may be some data issues because I'm not sure that they got the sewer waivers from Schertz into their data. So they got it from Comal County and the City of New Braunfels and Guadalupe County, but I don't know that they got Schertz, which is a big part of the dry Comal. So I just wanted to see that brought up and thought about in the planning process for future site plans up in that area. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. We only have one item on the consent agenda. It's the minutes for the December 12th, 2018 regular meeting. Commissioners, do I have a motion?
Go ahead and make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Greenwald. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, I have a second by Ms. Thompson. All right, call for a vote. Sorry, Ms. Bacon.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All right. Next item on the agenda, public hearing, item 4A, ZC 2018-008. Hold a public hearing, consider and make a recommendation on a request to rezone 802 Main Street, approximately .24 acres of land from General Business District, ZB, to Main Street Mixed Use District, MSMU. Emily.
Good evening, Commissioners. So just to get your bearings, this is Schertz Parkway and 78, Main Street and File Street. So the property is located here in the green box. You can see it. That's 802 Main Street. It is located at that intersection of File Street and Main Street. So this is what the current property looks like. It is a residential structure. The property owner is looking to utilize this as office space. The current property is zoned general business, which you can see here on the zoning exhibit. So you can see the property here again. This is the current zoning of general business. This is the proposed or the requested of the Main Street mixed use. Adjacent to the property, there's general business on both sides. There is actually a drainage channel immediately adjacent to the property, and then another piece of property that is currently fenced in. Adjacent on this side is a residential structure. Then you have Main Street. And then a property that's known Main Street Mixed Use, which is the old hospital that's now like the apartment complex, that building, and then R2. And then at the back of the property is the Union Pacific Railroad. On December 27th, we did mail 10 notices to the property owners within that red buffer, the 200-foot buffer. At this time, we've received 3 responses in favor of the proposal. You can see those in green. The public hearing notice signs were placed on the property on December 28th. This is just a picture showing that that sign was placed and has been there since that date. This is a clip of the future land use map that identifies the property in the future on the comprehensive land use plan as being the Main Street commercial. It's identified here by that red star. So the comprehensive land use plan identified this area as being part of historic downtown Schertz. The big goal behind that was to leverage Schertz history and try to use the existing structures for both, to utilize them both for residential and low-intensity commercial. The Main Street mixed use was kind of the zoning district that was designed to be able to do that. In Main Street mixed use, you can go either low-intensity commercial, like the property owner would like to do, the office spaces, or it can even be used as residential or go back and forth, essentially. A big thing with Main Street mixed use, as one of the current property owners said, with Main Street mixed use, there are some different standards that the current property as general business would have to meet, such as the parking. In the current zoning, trying to do an office space, they would be hit with our standard 1 per 250 requirement. Going to Main Street mixed use, they're required 2 parking spaces. It's supposed to really try to encourage that residential structure to revitalize that and use it as an office space like the comprehensive plan identified. So based on the comprehensive land use plan, the surrounding land uses, staff does feel that it is appropriate to rezone the property to Main Street mixed use, and we are making a recommendation of approval.
All right, thank you. All right, this item is for public hearing, so we're open the public hearing at 6:07. If anyone in the audience wishes to come forward and speak on this item, please state your name and address for the record.
John Del Toro, 3351 Main Street, 3351 Harvest Crest, Marion, Texas, 78124. We worked extensively with Brian James on the property. The property's got a history, so obviously everybody knows it's in the floodplain. Outside of that, when the initial inclination was it needed to go commercial about 5 years ago, we had the assistance of several people from planning, zoning, inspections, and other areas come and look at the property from all aspects. And probably the one thing, aside from parking and other elements that you're going to have trouble with, that we never were able to get around, was ADA requirements as well, because it sits about 3 feet higher than anything else surrounding, other than Jesse the neighbor. So, I mean, there's unique challenges, but like I said, the history of this, it obviously wasn't considered part of mixed Main Street use previous and non-conforming. However, the previous tenant we'd end up working with Mr. James going all the way back to 2014. Because there's a lot of unique challenges with the space, the surrounding area, and ultimately, if there's anything that would require any ADA access, you just can't get there from here. The grade from the road all the way up would almost require that a wheelchair be able to Z all the way across the front yard to get there. So realistically, the only thing that it can be is a residence. And then obviously, Dad bought the property back in '72, and ultimately since 2000, everybody on Main Street's been self-insuring. So at the end of the day, you're either paying premiums for insurance. You learned a lesson on flood insurance because you got flooded out by the creek in '98 and in 2000, and it got about 30 cents on the dollar. So Mom and Dad made a balanced decision. They got a lot of exposure to Main Street. This was one of them. But again, the history is, we've talked about this property before, and there's just a lot of unique challenges. About the only thing the house can be is a house. I just wanted to make sure everybody who isn't familiar with it at least knows the history of the property.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak on this? All right, we'll close the public hearing at 6:10. Commissioners, comments, questions?
I thought the Main Street area, and this was a while ago before I got on the commission, but weren't they looking at it as an entertainment area to try and revitalize that into an entertainment area a year or two ago?
Area, I think as Mr. Del Toro said, nature of those structures are not going to get that high intensity uses. I think what we wanted to do is sort of expand the range of uses. I think folks said, hey, a coffee shop again would be nice, a place to go get a beer after work. You know, you got Thirsty Joe's, now you've got Nick Marquez's place. Maybe something to grab a sandwich at lunch or something. So it's to expand the range of uses, but I don't know that we're ever envisioning it to be a big, lively all-night entertainment because, again, as the gentleman said, we got folks who live there who don't want a bunch of noise and things like that. So the idea is kind of push some festivals, do some things like that with it. Last meeting we had you guys consider the floodplain ordinance change as part of that. So we're tackling it different ways, trying to get the parking lot at the corner by the railroad cleaned up and things like that, some physical improvement. So, we're trying to expand. This is consistent with that because, again, we want folks to have the ability that if they can find a way to get the ADA or do the things, they can do that. But if that becomes a challenge, they can always rent it back again as a residence. And so we keep people invested.
Okay, but I recall also that parking was a big issue with trying to do that as well along Main Street because there's not enough space.
That's right. And so a lot of the uses that are allowed in the Main Street mixed use district are low parking requirement uses. That's the challenge with the GB is you've got stuff in there that tends to need a lot of parking to draw on uses in. Obviously, if we had a bunch of bars and restaurants up and down the thing, there'd be nowhere to park it. So we don't want all of that. We like a mix of some residents, some low-intensity office space, some retail that's open kind of till 5, 6, and then a couple of restaurants and bars.
So is the intention to continue running this out as a residential property?
We were thinking about doing like an office suite rental, so 3, 4 offices with kind of a main area that if they wanted to have a meeting with a couple people, they can go in there and have a meeting with a couple people. But nothing where there's going to be 10, 12 cars parked outside. We're going to have maybe 3 to 4 cars, 2 of which will most likely be in the driveway, and then the other 2 most likely going to be on the street. That was the issue that we were coming across when it was going to be commercial. We were going to try to take that garage down to have access to drive through and have parking in the back, but then they said, no, you have to have 2-way drive. And there's no way we can do that because we can't slide closer to Jesse's house, move the property that way because we still wouldn't be able to have 2 car passes, and you have that ditch right next to us. So that's why we wanted to go with the mixed use, to where some of those requirements are decreased, a little more flexibility.
The rezoning would require 2 spaces, correct? And it currently provides 2 spaces as well?
I believe so. So as you can see, it does have, from my understanding, with conversations through the chief building official, this garage area is actually underneath the power lines and for safety reasons would need to be taken down. So most likely what would happen is there would be space for the 2 spaces on the property in this general area. But they would be required that if the zoning goes through before they could get like a certificate of occupancy or anything like that to run the office space out of this.
Emily, let me apologize up front. If I didn't do enough homework, I did look at the zoning, the permitted uses in the different in the MSMU versus GB, and of course, Main Street mixed use is more restrictive than GB. But we've already talked about the reduced parking requirement. What other types of UDC requirements are not required in Main Street mixed use?
The biggest ones are the parking and setbacks. There's decreased setbacks from the general business. Just bear with me, I wrote them down. I thought that might be. I wrote them down somewhere. The side setbacks are reduced along with both the front and the rear. So rather than having a 10-foot or a 20-foot side setback, I believe it's a 5-foot side yard setback. Those are the 2 biggest things. Even when you read the Main Street mixed use zoning definition, it specifically highlights parking and setback reductions. Those are the 2 biggest differences. As the current property owner stated, the biggest one on this one, they looked at doing the offices in the current zoning. And the biggest challenge was they were going to have to put in roughly 12 to 13 spaces. I believe that's accurate. Basically, it was the entire property behind the house. They didn't have the ability to do 2 driveways. It was basically they had room to do a 10-foot drive. The required landscaping, the setbacks, all of that physically made the property almost unable to be used for the office space that they wanted. But requesting the Main Street mixed use allowed the parking to be reduced to those 2 spaces and really be able to still have the low-intensity commercial we want along Main Street and still have a land use that would be allowed currently.
And our wall requirement, because it's surrounded by general business, that's not applicable in this case, correct?
So actually, the way that the masonry wall requirement reads is if it's zoned or used as residential. So they would still be required to do the masonry wall on this side. Or this side, if you will.
If it stayed residential.
Both ways.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not aware of a caveat that Main Street mixed use gets rid of that requirement, if that's what you were.
All right, where'd that other question go? Oh. How does the zoning affect, because right now what we're looking at is an existing structure. In a 5-foot side yard setback, that's probably what we had in place when this house was built years ago. Mm-hmm. How does this affect if they wanted to tear down that structure and erect a new one? What sort of requirements apply then?
So the setbacks would be, if Main Street mixed use got approved, the setbacks would be whatever Main Street mixed use allows. But if they were to construct a new building, they would have to bring it up to the current office architectural standards.
Just an observation. When you put your notice map up there, mm-hmm. And I know this doesn't happen very often, maybe Main Street is a unique situation, but of those 10 properties that you sent notices to, how many of them are owned by the same person? At least those 3 that responded in yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. So. And that's just an observation.
So using this as commercial, it does not need to be brought up to ADA standards?
It would still need to be.
Okay.
And Main Street mixed use, if we use it, rezone it to Main Street mixed use, it's still going to have to be brought up to ADA standards.
If they're going to use it for commercial, if it's going to stay residential, then they don't.
Correct.
So then if it's going to be continued use as residential, will they or will they not be required to put up the masonry wall to separate them from?
If it's a residential use, adjacent to a residential use, from my understanding, they would not. Because it's when a commercial use wants to basically develop or be used adjacent to a residentially zoned or used property.
So because, even though it's being used as residential, it's zoned GB. So it's, even though it's a non-conforming use, then we would treat it as a non-conforming and not require the wall?
I don't believe that our masonry wall requirement has a caveat for if the use is legal non-conforming.
So I think some of the questions you're answering, maybe we really don't have the answers to, because we would actually need to see if the house has been occupied as residential or commercial for the last 6 months, because we have some non-conforming rules that take place. So we would need to kind of look into some of that stuff. But truly, this is a zoning case, and if he chose not to do what he's saying that he's going to do, it would give him the flexibility to be able to work with the physical constraints there to either do residential or commercial. So maybe taking a look at it as just a zoning case and what they're able to do there, because he could sell the property a week from now and it could be something completely different than office. So.
Thank you. I only brought it up because I was trying to understand the differences between and the advantages of Main Street mixed use over general business. That's the only reason I have the question.
I think, so if you were to ask me, I mean, if you're asking me, I would say the advantages are the parking. I mean, I think a lot of those properties are zoned general business, and there's just no way for them to provide the adequate parking. And if we're trying to create this environment over there, and I think council, you know, they have their Main Street mixed use, or their Main Street committee that they work on it. They want this different type of environment over there. This is the way that I think that was decided when the zoning went through to kind of make some of those changes to add the flexibility so that folks are able to still have a commercial business there, but not provide the 15 parking spaces that are required for certain types of uses. And then if y'all look at it, the commercial uses are less intense, and they're not all inclusive of everything in the general business.
I guess I would just say the bottom line is that we're dealing with an area that has a lot of river unique challenges, mainly with the floodplain. And in my opinion, anything that we do that makes it easier for a property owner to continue to invest and improve on the properties, I think is probably something appropriate to do, so that area doesn't become decrepit and derelict and eventually abandoned and becomes something that's more of a eyesore or even worse for our community. So I would think that the intended use is appropriate for the area. So any other comments or questions? All right, do I have a motion? This would be to make a recommendation for or against.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion that we forward this to City Council with a recommendation of approval.
All right, I have a motion and a second by Mr. Greenwald. All right, any other comments or questions? All right, call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. All right, 6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Next item on the agenda, items for individual consideration. Item 5A, WA 2018-009. Consider and act upon a request for approval of a waiver regarding on-site sewage facilities for UFP Schertz subdivision and approximately 23-acre tract of land located at 21,700 FM 2252, City of Schertz, Comal County, Texas. Emily.
Excuse me. Mr. Dahl and Commissioners, as you had mentioned, the property is approximately 23 acres. So this is FM 2252, and the subject property is here in green. You can notice that currently it's actually 2 separate parcels. The one parcel here that's currently the UFP business, and then this second parcel that is a undeveloped piece of property. The preliminary plat that they are proposing is actually in order to combine these 2 properties into one, so the existing UFP business can build a lunch/break room for their employees. So they are requesting an OSSF waiver, or essentially a waiver to not connect to sanitary sewer. This is the waiver letter that they have provided to us. It was included in y'all's packets as well. The current business does utilize a current septic system on their property. So as you can see, this is the UFP property here. They are indicating that the closest sewer connection for this property to utilize is actually 9,800 feet away. So if you follow the red line down 2252 and then adjacent to 35, the closest connection is roughly in this general area for them to be able to tie into sewer. The engineering department has reviewed this request and indicated their support of granting the waiver based on no sanitary sewer facilities existing in the area, noted that it is similar to other waivers that have been approved. Additionally, they have verified that if sewer availability becomes in the close proximity to UFP, they would be required to tie into the sanitary sewer system and disconnect from their OSSF. Additionally, if this waiver is approved, they would need to obtain a permit from Comal County in order to actually get a septic system for the property. But like I had mentioned, they have one on their existing business currently. Staff does make a recommendation of the waiver based on the distance to the nearest available sewer connection, and it being similar to waivers that we have approved in the past.
All right, commissioners, comments, questions?
This waiver is required because the break room would be built on the adjacent, and they can't run it to the one they already have doesn't have capacity, or?
So it's kind of a bigger picture. So the plat is required because neither property is currently platted. So they have decided to combine the two lots into one larger lot, do the formal platting process so they can get that building permit. Since the properties aren't platted, they can't obtain a new building permit even if it was on their existing facility site. The reason for the waiver, we have the requirement that every property has to connect to the sanitary sewer system. Based on the distance, they feel it's unfeasible for them to be able to do that. So they've requested the waiver basically so they don't have to connect to the sanitary sewer at this time. But truly the plat is because they want to pull a building permit and they can't do that without it being platted.
Well, they already have an on-site sewage facility.
Yes, sir, they do.
And so they are probably not going to install a new one, but to get through the plat process, they have to have the waiver. Is that?
Exactly. I'm not sure if they're going to install a new system. Use the existing.
Technicality.
Be up to Comal County to decide.
Given they're an existing user out there, that they've been out there for quite a few years, and so I don't see a real issue with this. All right, any other comments or questions? Does anybody have a motion?
I'll make a motion. We go ahead and approve the on-site sewer waiver for where's the property? Oh, there. EC 2018-032. Thank you.
That would be the preliminary plat. I believe you're looking for WA 2018-009.
Thanks anyway.
So amended? All right. Motion for approval by Commissioner Greenwald. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Ray. Any other comments or questions? All right, call for a vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye. 6 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Next item on the agenda, 5B, PC 2018-032, consider and act upon a request for approval of a preliminary plat of the UFP Schertz subdivision in approximately 23-acre tract of land located at 21,700 FM 2252, City of Schertz, Comal County, Texas. Emily.
So this is essentially the preliminary plat associated with the waiver that you just approved. Subject property shown in green. The end goal is to be able to combine these two unplatted tracts to be able to build a break room for their current employees. The proposed lot does have frontage on FM 2252, which is a TxDOT maintained roadway. The plat is making a dedication of 15 feet along the frontage per TxDOT's request. Do have a letter of no objection from them. The proposed preliminary plat is consistent with applicable requirements for the property ordinances and regulations, has been reviewed by planning, Public Works, Engineering, and Fire with no comments, no objections. Staff is making a recommendation of approval for the preliminary plat.
All right, commissioners, comments, questions? Doesn't seem that we have any questions. Guess we'll entertain a motion.
I'll motion that we approve the PC 2018-032.
All right. Motion by Commissioner Ray. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second by Commissioner Greenwald. All right. Any other comments or questions? All right. Call for a vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. 6 ayes, no nays. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, request and announcements. Request by commissioners to place items on a future planning and zoning agenda. Does anybody have anything? I just do have a quick comment. Been having conversations over the last few months with Bryce and the other staff members. We're looking at some suggestions and ideas on UDC changes. Staff is going to bring forward, probably not at our next meeting, but the meeting after, on ideas and suggestions and the things that we can do to modify and change our UDC, bring it a little bit more up to date. Would ask that all the commissioners kind of think about things that you like about what you see in Schertz, what you don't like, things that you think we need to change, and let's have a real good conversation when we bring that forward. Our next meeting is going to have quite a few other plat items on it and possibly rezoning, so I don't think we're going to have time for it. So probably 2 meetings from now for the initial kickoff of this discussion. All right. Any other announcements by commissioners? No. All right. Announcements by city staff.
Okay, sorry, we're all looking at each other. We don't know what's going on. I assume we had something, but we don't. The one announcement I would have, and he stepped up and you met him, is with us is our new city manager, Mark Brown. He comes to us from Alamo Heights. Prior to that, he was over in Terrell Hills. Started last week, came back his second week, which is always a good sign, and made it through his first council meeting last night, which is another good sign. But he's been out meeting staff, meeting folks in the community, so glad to have him here.
And welcome aboard. All right, does anybody have anything else? All right, with that then, we'll adjourn 6:32.